Okay, and then it's about planning. It's time to have some conversations with your family, right? Stuff like, hey, what do we do? What can we expect, right? This is something you probably have to have, if you have children, something you probably want to communicate with. Probably a little more difficult to talk to kids who haven't experienced it firsthand, or didn't have school for a year and a half, didn't have to wear masks in school. But have that conversation on what they can expect. The most important thing we can do is make sure everyone is aware of what is likely to happen, and let's deal with it now over time rather than reacting. I want to be proactive. Right? So have that conversation with your family. Start coming up with plans. Right? What are you going to do if one of your children gets sick? Right? What's the plan for that? What are you going to do if one of your family members get sick? Right? Who's staying home? Have you deconflicted that with work? Right? What do you do at work if one of your colleagues gets sick and has to stay home? Who's picking up that slack? Right? Look at those talking points. Try to figure out what we're going to do and come up and develop plans on how you're going to react once this inevitably comes into the community. Right? So it's all about planning. Right? Everyone who's gone through quarantines had someone who kind of took care of them, right? Everyone had I'm calling them quarantine buddies, right? So if you get locked down because someone in your family comes down positive, right? Do you have someone who can, kind of help you out, pick some stuff up for you, put it in your quarantine delivery? But restrict dining during the DFAC. First, probably spread out tables, no more than a couple people per table. We'll have to extend the hours so we can start rotating people through. At some point, I might have to do no in DFAC service, which means you got to go in, a certain amount of people can go in, pick up clam shells, and then head back to their rooms, right? I'm hoping that doesn't have to happen, but we have to plan for it all the same, right? So just consider those type of things amongst your organizations, your workplaces, and how you're going to deal with that if it comes to it, right? Class a lot, starting this week, I think, possibly next week. Is it this week, Mike? Start this episode, or this week's edition, and we're going to start with probably a half page or a page layout that's going to, over time, build on concepts in which to reinforce the things that you should be doing to preparing for the inevitability of COVID entering this country, right? And we're going to do that forever. Also, the roller, right? The roller is a great information source. We're going to start putting a handful of slides up each week, and again, building on that information to provide more knowledge and more resources for you to help you and your families prepare for what to do when COVID hits the country, and a lot of signage. We're going to get a lot of signage everywhere. Please pay attention, right? Wash your hands, think about spacing and those type of things that we saw back in the States, but hopefully to a more manageable level. So pay attention to that. We're also even thinking about over time as we build more and more references and putting together like almost a workbook, just 5 or 6 pages of information and providing that to the community through the mailbox. Very similar to what we did with the community MWR survey that we put in everyone's mailbox. We don't have enough information for that yet. Not enough has been codified, but once we do, we're thinking about providing that resource to the community as well. Facebook is another thing. Right? Not everyone has Facebook. I'm not really a big Facebook person. But if you have someone who is, just ask them to keep you in the loop on what's going on and share information. It will be very helpful to get information out to the community as quick as possible. What we get it's PCR that is the problem. Antigen tests are very rarely inaccurate. You have to be contagious. You have to be shedding virus actively to trigger the antigen test. The PCR test is notoriously known for having false positives because you can test positive on a PCR for up to 90 days after, and it has a cyclical little process too, meaning you can take a PCR one day, test negative, and a week later you can test positive, right? And so we've dealt with that a lot, and so we have processes for that. Typically, when we get a PCR positive, especially if we know that they've had COVID in the last 30 to 60 days. We follow it up immediately with an antigen test. If that antigen test is negative, 24 hours later, we do another antigen test. With 2 negative antigen tests following a positive PCR, you're considered a historical case and you're released, right? And so, but if you come positive on an antigen test, you are positive, right? And so that's when you earn your extra time, right? And so we're still working with the RMI to work through some of the edge cases. There's a lot of edge cases when you have multiple testing, right? What happens when you're negative on PCR on day 5, but positive on day 10? It's possible PCR, that's why we follow with antigen test, right? Same thing on the Hano side, right? We do a PCR, and then we do an antigen test. If PCR is positive and antigen is negative, do we do a second antigen test on? That's considered historic, and we move them forward, right? Because they're going into quarantine. That's what the RMIs agreed to. And so we have some exceptions there, right? The difference on this side is we do 2 antigen tests to be super careful, okay? But we deal with that a lot, right? Every week or so, we have someone who tests positive on a PCR. Doc and his team go through the historics. They look at all the things. They base it on scientific facts. They look at the antigen tests, and they make a determination on risk and the likelihood of it being an active case. And so far, we've done that very well over the last 2 years because we still don't have any community spread. But you bring up a good point. It is possible. So, if you didn't know, it's been mandatory to have you fully vaccinated into the RMI for over a year, right? But because of the mutual defense, kind of treaty that not mutual defense treaty, but because of the compact and treaties that we have the RMI, they understand that they cannot enforce a rule that I can't legally uphold, right? I cannot legally mandate people to be vaccinated, except for the military. Military people are legally, that's why I'm 100% on military, right? Department of the Army civilians are almost, right? That's tied up in court right now, right? And so Department of the Army civilians, but I got a pretty high, I'm at like 98% for my Department of the Army civilians, right? My issue is the contractors. I have no legal authority to enforce mandatory vaccinations for the contractors. So I can't do anything about it. My hands are tied until the Department of Defense issues guidance that I can. Meanwhile, most tenants and contractors are doing just that because they can require vaccinations for their employees, and I think most of them are going that route. That's why we're starting to see most of the people who have come in under vectors are already vaccinated. I just can't enforce it. So what the RMI has done is that if you've ever read their exception memos, every week we request an exception memo for entry into the country, and every week they approve it, and at the very bottom they go, asterisk, subject to DOD enforcement or authorities to enforce blah, 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 blah. And that's the one line I had to add in like a year ago that says because I can't physically enforce that requirement. As of now, as you know, we currently limit flights to one United a week. There's only one United flight a week, but United has made it quite clear they plan on opening up to 3 a week. We do not plan to open up any other flights than the one per week. And the reason for that is I have a significant logistical tail to get through the quarantine process, pick up the airport. We're going to have to do as of now, we're going to have to do an antigen test at the airport upon arrival. All the gear is going to have to get fully, cleaned up. They're going to get read on, delivered to their houses. And I got this process. It's like clockwork. And doing that multiple times a week is going to drastically increase the logistical requirements to support that. It increases drastically the odds of us making a mistake. And that's what I'm really trying to mitigate, any mistakes being made. And so for the interim process, even though we're going to 5, and that becomes a little more manageable, the plan is to still only authorize one tranche per week. And really, the limiting factor is really the housing, the quarantine housing that I have, right? I can only bring in so many people per week. And so opening up the flights when there's no longer restriction on United, it just makes things a lot more complicated than they have to be, and I can just bring people in once a week. You're actually right in the middle of that, right? We've actually weeks ago, we did a test order just to make sure we could get it here, right? Once we found out the RMI was using it probably a month ago, and we looked at some research into it, found out it would probably be a good idea to get a base level amount here in case there was a breakout case. We subsequently, I think last week, we put in a much larger order, and I think Doc Bentley and the team are right now doing full analysis and assessment, like you kind of saw those numbers up there, to kind of justify an adequate number of medications. We have a host of different levels of medications already on the island for a relatively small number. We're looking at rather straight up COVID, then you got the more complicated cases where you have COVID in conjunction with pneumonia or the flu or something like that, so that's a different set of medications and antibiotics or whatever you guys medical folks call it. And so we're building that list now, and we have good confidence that we'll have most of that in place before this happens. In fact, I can really confident that we'll have it probably in the next few weeks, well before we can expect this to happen. So,
my name is Sean Brady, and I'm the CYS Youth Sports Coach. So we're hosting our 3 summer baseball clinics. We're doing our final one today, our home run derby. What's up, Kai? And we're out here. We have a new pitching machine that our last coach, Sam, actually got a grant for CYS. He got that, he got the yellow screen, he got a bunch of gear. So we're out here, we're excited to use it. We just have kids age K all the way through high school here. Anybody who wants to participate, anybody who's still here on island during the summer, to come out and play. Well, everybody knows that summer and baseball go together, so we have hot dogs out here, we have some lemonade, some Capri Sun, and we have all the kids excited about it. And I don't know, it's summertime, it's baseball time. We just want all the kids to be together. We want the community to come out and be together and have fun. That's really all it is. Expect events like this for all types of different sports in the future. Yep, we have a robust sports schedule coming up for the next school year that we're really excited about. We're excited and we're happy that you're here covering it, and we're excited to hit some home runs today.